Hi, and welcome to the March 2023 meeting of the Charlotte Woodworkers Association. At this meeting, Tad Kepley came to talk to us. Tad lives in Lexington, North Carolina, and he is an expert in greenwood spoon carving. He has carved something on the order of 3,000 spoons. He is very, very enthusiastic about what he does, and that comes through in the video, so I think you'll enjoy this. So he begins by talking a bit about himself and how he got into this and what he does. He talks about the tools he uses, about some of the techniques, hints on things you should do, things you shouldn't do. He does a short demo for us, and at the end he takes some questions. So I hope you enjoy this. Here are a couple of pictures from the meeting. On the left side you'll see some of the carving axes he brought with him, and it might surprise you to know that this is not his entire set of carving axes. And on the right side, you can see him using one of those axes to get started on a new spoon. So he's pretty well known, and if you do a Google search for his name, you'll see a lot of hits. He's done a lot of presentations, he's taught at some places, a lot of his things have been shown in various places, but here's a couple of links on things you might want to look at if you're interested. The first one is a link to his Facebook page, and the second one is a link to a recording about an hour and a half long on Spotify called Talking Spoons with Tad Kepley.
Okay, I'll start all over again for the Zoomers. I've invited Tad Kepley to demonstrate how he makes wooden utensils, obviously using hand tools, green wood. And I'm only going to say this one more time because the board has already heard me say it. But I was so impressed with his skill from the antique show that we had back in January that I asked Tad to join us. But his skill is such that he can make a toothpick with an axe and still count to 10. And that being said, I'm going to let Tad take over and we'll go from there.
Test. Okay, good. Well, I'd like to thank Vice President Jim Kakasik for inviting me. I always look forward to an opportunity to come and speak with a group about greenwood spoon carving and greenwood carving in general, because although I do mostly spoons, I did bring some other greenwood things that I carve as well to so that you can see it's there's a lot more to carve from greenwood other than just spoons, and we'll talk about those as I go through some of the things that are on the table. But just a little bit of background, you know, I didn't start carving until I was 52 years old. I retired out of law enforcement. And my background is in competitive pistol shooting. I did that for about 35 years. And so after I retired from law enforcement, I took about 4 months and I loaded about all the brass I had, and I reached over and picked up my grandfather's whittling knife, and there was a wooden dowel beside of that knife. And I can't explain it other than I just started carving. Nobody asked me to carve. And this started out as a 50 caliber, and it ended up as a 30-06, but that's okay. But that's my intro into carving. And I spent a lot of time with my father, who was also a retired assistant chief from my same department that I retired from. And his father was born in 1899, and he didn't start carving until he was 83 years old. And from the time he was 83 until he died at the age of 99, he carved more ducks and birds than me and you can count. And they were wonderful. And he was just a phenomenal carver. He made toys for the children. And so I think it was just only, I think it was just meant to be that I reached over and picked up his old case pocket knife that he used to whittle everything that he carved with that knife. And so this is the first thing I ever carved. And so I can remember, like I say, I spent a lot of time with my parents right after I retired. And my big brother is a master carver. Now, he won't touch greenwood, okay? And we'll talk about the liabilities of greenwood. Some of you, I'm sure, are probably familiar, but he only carves dry wood, and he loves to carve walnut. He's a power carver and he's a hand carver. He does it all, but he's a master carver, and he carved a spoon from my mother. And while I was there visiting with Mom and Dad, of course, they were retired, he had some bowls and some different things that he had carved, and he had carved this spoon out of maple, dry maple he had carved. And so I told my mother, I said, Mom, I'm so impressed with how smooth that bowl is on that spoon. I said, I think I want to try one. And I just didn't know I was going to carve nearly 3,000 more. And that's really what happened. Now, when I first started carving, the only thing I knew was a bandsaw and a belt sander. I didn't know anything else. And I didn't carve many that way, but my dad got me started because down in the basement, he had bandsaw, he had all the power tools I needed, including a bandsaw and a belt sander. And so I carved several spoons that way. And then I found out about this greenwood spoon carving community, and most of those folks are from Sweden and over in the UK. And there's a Facebook site called Greenwood Spoon Carving, etc., something Sloyd. And so I started learning about greenwood spoon carving, where you do it all with hand tools, basically an axe, a Sloyd knife, a straight knife, and a hook knife. And that's really about all you need to carve a spoon with greenwood. And of course, I started getting on Facebook, and I found I've got friends all over the world, and I've got a spoon collection from all over the world. I did not bring them tonight, but I literally have a spoon from just about anywhere you can imagine. And I've made a lot of friends that way, most of them in Sweden and over in the UK, Wales, and that area. And so I soon gave up the bandsaw and the belt sander. And when I started, when I realized that you could take a piece of greenwood and carve a spoon in a relatively short period of time with an axe and a couple knives, I was hooked. Number one, I love working with the axe, and all you got to do is look over there, and you know I like carving axes. And I got a lot of carving axes, and I didn't bring near what I got, okay? But I like them. Now, I did bring some really nice ones, and a lot of those came from Sweden. A lot of those came from the UK, and we've got some really fantastic makers right here in North Carolina, up in Marion, phenomenal make Sloyd knives, hook knives, and carving axes. And I want to show you those in just a minute. But not only that, my mother, when she was showing me the things that my big brother Kent, he's 7 years older than me, she also gave me a couple things. My grandfather on her side of the family carved this about 75 years ago. And I can promise you, he didn't carve it at that time. He didn't carve it because he enjoyed carving and he wanted to carve a spoon. He carved it because he needed a spoon. There's no question about it. And so my grandpa Owens carved this spoon, and she gave it to me. And it's just a phenomenal spoon. And as a matter of fact, this is what I would recommend that anybody's getting into greenwood spoon carving. I would recommend starting out with a spoon like this. My wife calls it the taco spoon because it's made to stir and cook with like this. But the design is such that you can chop up hamburger meat really well with it. And that's why she calls it her taco spoon, because she makes tacos chopping up hamburger meat. But it's just a phenomenal spoon. And Grandpa Owens literally made it because he needed a spoon. He grew up on a farm, and they made the things that they needed. And that's another thing that really attracts me to greenwood spoon carving, is because of the fact that you can make something. In other words, I don't need anything but this block, and I've made about 4 or 5 of these, what I call chopping blocks. You just take a piece of greenwood, and I always try to keep me a couple legs, several legs in cherry, let them dry. You take a piece of greenwood, take it about a 20 to 25 degree angle, and when you put these dry legs up in there, it'll just dry around these legs. And so it'll just lock in. It'll lock in. Now, sometimes I don't want that to happen, and I'll let it dry, and I'll make sure that the legs will come out. Just depends on what kind of design. But the good thing about greenwood spoon carving is you can take your show on the road, so to speak, just like I am tonight. All I need is my tools and my chopping block and a piece of greenwood, and we're ready to go. And so that's the other part of this. I found out good. I gave, the first 300 spoons or so, I gave them away, and people were just being nice, and because they were pretty ugly at that time. But after a while, started getting a little better at it. And this was the very first spoon I ever carved. And of course, I gave it to my mother. And when my mom and dad passed away a couple years ago, of course, I got the spoon back, but that was number one. And so anyway, I literally was hooked from that point on. But the good thing about greenwood spoon carving is I continue to make the spoons, and I've made about 3,000 spoons up to this point over an 8-year period. I carve about 6 days a week only because I want to. There's no work in it. If there was any work in it, Tad would be back shooting again. I do it for the sheer love of it. I'm very passionate about it, and I love to talk about it because I love for other people to get the same joy out of it that I get out of it. So that's what it's all about, is just hoping that others will enjoy it like I do. And then the other good part is now we have a farmer's market in Lexington at the old train depot. It's a covered depot, open on the sides when you open up the doors. And on Saturday mornings, I go there from May to October. And then we have a couple holiday markets. And I go there on Saturday mornings. I get to run my mouth. Since I retired from the police department, I don't see folks like I used to see them. So I get to go there. I get to run my mouth. I get to show the kids, show the adults. I sell the spoons, and then I buy more axes and knives. That's the way it works. And so it just repeats itself. But the good thing is, and the reason I go is only because they allow me to make them there. I don't think I've ever done a show or went anywhere that they didn't allow me to make the spoons while I'm there, because I think that's a big part of it. It's demonstrating and showing others what to do. Matter of fact, the first Saturday in May this year, I'm going to do a thing called Carving Kids. And I have what's called everybody's familiar with, I call it a spoon horse or a spoon mule. The only difference from a shaving horse and a spoon mule is when you sit down on it, you take your legs, and there's a couple small timbers that will trap the spoon, and I can use a push knife like this. This is a Jason Lunnan, and I can sit down on it, and I can literally carve spoons. Well, when I do the Carving Kids, I'll take basswood. I'll take some basswood with me, and I put gloves on the kids, and I let them use this push knife, or I've got several more, and they get to make chips, and they absolutely love it, all the way down to the little ones, and they're getting introduced into carving. I have 2 grandsons. One is 5 and one is 7. And I've done several videos of them. They want to go out in the garage with Papaw, and they want to do this right here. They either want to make some chips, or they'll say, Papaw, I want to split some wood, because this is one of the main tools that I use, a froe, and my homemade mallet. I make these out of dogwood. Hickory works, but dogwood, you just take a limb and split this off and carve the handle. But these things last forever. But because I split whatever log I'm working with, the first thing that I have to do is I have to whack it right there on the pith, right in the center where the pith channel's at, and split it in 2. And then I have to take the pith channel out. And then, of course, I always use the biggest tool I can to remove excess material till I get down to what I call a miniature 2x4. Okay. And so my grandsons, when they see that, I literally bought them a fro. You can buy a fro that's only about 6 inches long with a 6 inch, and it just fits them. And then I made them a smaller mallet, and they'll chop anything that I put in front of them. I mean, they'll beat it and beat it. And I just have to, you just have to teach them how grain works and those kind of things. And they absolutely love it. And when I post those videos on my Instagram site, people absolutely love it because it's the beginning for them. It's the beginning of being a spoon carver. I let them work on some of the spoons that I didn't do too good with, and they don't know any different. They're just making chips and they're carving a spoon, and that's what it's all about. And they're spending time with Papaw. So that's one of the good things about what I do there at the house. So it doesn't matter whether I'm up at the farmer's market or I'm at the house or I'm here. It doesn't matter. I don't need any electricity. I can do it from here. But it's not necessary that you have a mallet and a fro. A lot of people will just use their axe. They'll use a mallet, make them a homemade mallet, and hit the back of their axe, hand axe, and you can split the wood too. I like it. This is a Drew Langster fro, and it's solid on the bottom. I have the old shingle fros too that will move up and down on the handle, and they will work. But Drew Langster, who lived up in the North Carolina mountains, designed this, and it's sold at Lee Nielsen Tools is where you get this. They run about $90, I believe. And this is my second or third handle on this one. But you cannot tear that thing up right there. That's made a bunch of spoons. But I like it because the key to greenwood spoon carving, if you don't want your spoon to split, is you got to move the pith channel. And when I say remove the pith channel, you need to go about a 1/4 inch on every side of that pith channel to come on out from it. You don't want to get too greedy and end up your spoon cracking because you got too close to the pith channel. So you clear that. And so that's why when I do a demo like this, when Jim was with me up in January, I did the same thing. I like to try to give a visual of kind of how it goes from just a log. And when I think of a log, I'm just thinking about an old wild cherry tree growing on the edge of the wood line, or a cherry tree, apple tree that maybe fell in the yard, because fruit woods make wonderful spoons. Why? The reason they do is because they have a very tight grain, and that works good with liquids and foods, as opposed to like white oak, red oak. They have a more porous grain that can trap the liquids in food. Not that you can't use that. You can use that for a spoon. But if we're talking about a tight grain, and of course, this is walnut here, black walnut here, and people love those. Cherry and apple. Apple's my favorite. Cherry would be a close second, okay? And then peach, pear, plum, so on and so on. What are some of the fruit woods? What are some of the woods that you could use for spoon carving that wouldn't be a fruit wood? What would be something that would be good? What's that? Maple. Matter of fact, that's what I've actually got here is a piece of maple, and I'll tell you some more. Dogwood, beech, and birch. Dogwood, beech, and birch. Again, now we're talking about greenwood, okay? Now, sometimes it's not a bad idea when you get greenwood to let it season just a little bit. In other words, I want to keep the moisture in there, but sometimes it can be so wet that it's not as good to carve than if you would let it season just a little bit. And so sometimes you kind of got to figure that out. But sometimes, like I'm getting ready to go get an apple tree up in the mountains. I'm getting ready to go get one this weekend. well, I won't be able to let that thing seize. I'm going to be so ready to pop that thing. It's like a box of Cracker Jacks. I'm going to get in there. I want to see what the prize is, because so like an apple now, it's kind of like this. If it were an apple, a small apple tree at a what do they call the places where they have the farms and they have all the apple trees and the peach trees? What are they? Orchard. Sometimes in an orchard, they grow fast and they don't get that tall. The apple wood might just be the sapwood might just be whitewood. You take an apple tree from the mountains that's grown, that's a big old apple tree. When you cut that bad boy, there's this beautiful, creamy, dark heartwood in the middle. Example, right here is a coffee scoop that I carved. That's apple wood here. A lot of the spoons on this table are apple wood. It doesn't mean that the sapwood is not pretty or beautiful. It is. It carves well. It takes on a wonderful knife finish, and that's why I like apple wood. But when I go to the mountains and I cut into it and I see that beautiful dark heartwood in there, that's what Tad went for. That's that apple gold that I'm looking for. And what I absolutely love. Crab apple is very similar. Matter of fact, I think this is crab apple here. Crab apple is just almost identical to apple wood. But again, I like to carve fruit woods just simply because they have a tight grain and it works good with liquids and food. In some cases, it really doesn't matter. This shrink pot, how many of you are familiar with what a shrink pot is? Shrink pot? Okay. So this is the one and only shrink pot I've ever made. It's all apple wood, everything you see here. So this is sapwood right here. It's fairly blonde, okay? Whereas the top that I've made here is apple wood, and it's pretty dark heartwood, okay? The bottom was too, but I got a little Carolina blue milk paint on the bottom there. But just for information only, you take a limb, and that's what this was right here, a small limb about this size on the apple, from an apple tree, just a small limb, and all you do is drill out, what's that called, an auger you can use to, bracing bit, what you do is cut it off, drill a hole all the way through it, and then what you do is you get a dry piece and you cut a groove in the bottom, and what it does is it shrinks around the dry piece. So you could use, let's say this is the apple's wet, and you take a piece of basswood and make a bottom the right size, cut your groove out, pop that in there, and what it does is over time, a week or two, it's going to completely seal itself. It will seal it up almost tight enough to put a liquid in there, okay? And some people will do that just to show you how well it shrinks around there. Because I remember when I first made it, I could see light. And day after day, well, guess what? Over time, you couldn't see no light. It completely shrunk around it. But people make some really elaborate shrink pots, big ones. They'll take a log and they'll make it completely square. Just beautiful shrink pots, and then they'll do some cold roasting on the side. How many of you have ever heard of cold roasting? It's an old art form. This is cold roasting here, and cold roasting is nothing more than just putting a little artwork on the handle. And so what it is, cold roasting is single line incision. So you can take the tip of your knife, your pocket knife, and then what I do is I'll take a pencil and I'll draw whatever pattern I want. Sometimes I'll do a dogwood flower. Sometimes I'll do something like you see here. And then I literally take the tip of the knife and I engrave every line that you see. And then I'll either take new coffee grounds or cinnamon, and then I rub it into the incision. And then I'll take something and I'll burnish the wood fibers right back over the top, and there you go. That's called cold roasted. It literally dates back to Viking times. It's about 1,000-year-old art form. And there are some people that are really good at cold roasting. Matter of fact, I think they carve spoons just so they can cold roast. Okay, that's how good they are. And they do it on shrink pots, all kind of different things. So I'm about to lose my place here. See where I'm at. Let me show you. Let me kind of go through some of the tools and tell you about some of the makers. And then what I want to do is kind of show you that process, a fairly simple process about how I can take a piece of greenwood and then hew out a spoon and then go to the knife, because you can do it in a relatively short period of time. So I talked about the froe and the mallet. This is my favorite part of carving spoons is the axe. This happens to be a Jason Lunnan. He lives in Marion, North Carolina, and he is a tool maker. He makes knives, hook knives, and axes. He makes a little smaller axe than this that is called a spoon carving axe. It's just a little bit smaller. I like the bigger ones, just a little bit bigger with a longer handle. He made a short run with some tiger maple wood handles, and I just had to have one. I absolutely love his work, and this is a great example of one of his carving axes. This is one more from Jason Lunnan. This is the first one that I ever got, very similar. And I believe this is a hickory. I believe it's a hickory handle, and it's stained, if I'm not mistaken, but just a very nice, balanced carving axe. All of these, again, Jason Lunnan from up in the North Carolina mountains. The majority of the axes, of the carving axes you see here, are from Sweden. This is a Hans Carlson, and the name of it is a Sloyd axe. My favorite axe for many, many years after I found out about Mr. Hans Carlson and his sons, and they make these in Sweden. You cannot go wrong. They're not easy to get. You kind of got to get lucky. Everybody is familiar with Gransford Brook. This wildlife hatchet was my very first spoon carving axe before I realized that people make spoon carving axes. And so I carved for about 1.5 years with this axe here. And when you don't know any difference, when you don't know what you don't know, you just go at it. And that's what I did. And I later got a carving grind put on it from my friend down in Florida. I'm just not that inclined to do it myself. I should be able to, but I can't. This is a Gransford Brook large carving axe. This was what's just a regular handle. I think that's about a 4.5 or 5 inch face on that. Pretty hefty. So it will really remove some material fast. So if you've got a big piece of wood and you've got to move a lot of material, this is the axe to start with. And a lot of people will do that. They'll start with a bigger axe, and then they may end up going to a smaller axe, just like this Greenhaven. This is a really light axe, Greenhaven. Forge.com. Josh Whitehead down in Florida, he makes several different axes. And when people ask me, they'll say, Ted, what would I need if I wanted to get into a spoon carving? I was going to see if it's for me. I tell them 3 things. Go on to Amazon, get you a Mora 106, which is a carving knife, and then get you a 164 hook knife. Okay, so there's your straight knife. 164 is the hook knife, and then he makes an essential carving axe for $55. I got about 3 or 4 of them called the Essential Carving Axe, $55. You haven't invested the kind of money I've got in a lot of my axes, and you can determine, is this something that I want to do? And you don't have a whole lot of money in it. This one's a little bit more because he did some fancy stuff on this one, but he makes an essential carving axe with a longer handle and a little bit bigger head. and it's good enough to carve with. This is a Gransford Brook. The only difference is it's a large carving axe, just like the one I showed you. The only difference is Mr. Willie Sundquist gave him some information about how to make a nice carved handle, and there it is. That's a carved handle, and I don't like it as well as I do the original handle. This is Julia Kathloff. She makes this axe right here. She's been doing them for probably, I'm gonna guess, about 3 years. She's in Sweden, and a lot of people have her axes. She was the CEO of not Gransford Brook, but they're a brother company that makes a lot of axes. I can't something else, Brook in Sweden. Well, she was a CEO for that company, and she decided she wanted to get into axe making, and this is her spoon carving axe, and it is a wonderful axe, just a wonderful carving axe. Julia Kathloff from Sweden. What's that? No. I've got some of my buddies have been to Sweden when they have some of their they have festivals and things like that. Let's see here. This is a Cervante. I say Cervante Darve. I'm probably chewing up that name, but he is from Sweden. Him and his wife. He does all the metal work, forges all the knives, the hook knives, and the axes, and then she does his wife, I'll think of her name in a minute, but she does all the handles. They're just absolutely amazing people, but that's a really hefty, nice carving axe. Just a wonderful axe. And I actually have a smaller one that I got from them, I think, before I got this one, that's a little bit smaller if you were doing some small work. So it's just a smaller head and a much lighter weight carving axe. Again, you can only carve with one axe at a time. I just like them, and I think that's obvious. This I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Nick Westerman, but Nick Westerman is from Wales over in the UK, and he is very well known. I was very lucky to get this carving axe because he hurt his shoulder and he quit making them probably in 2017. He quit making them. He only makes Sloyd knives. And Tuka cams and hook knives. And I have several of these, and I'll show them to you. A leather maker up in the North Carolina mountains made this mask. But what happened is I've been on his list. When you get on Mr. Nick Westerman's list to have a knife or something, the wait list is somewhere around 18 to 24 months. And then when your name comes up, you can get one of everything. You can only get one of whatever you want. But my name was on the list to get an axe, and before my name come up, he quit making them. And so what happened was I couldn't help myself. I sent him an email about 3 years ago, and I said, Mr. Nick, I said, if something happened that you ever did one in a demo or something like that, I said, I'd like to have one if you ever have a demo. Well, about 2 years later, he sent me an email. He said, Tad, he said, just checking with you. He said, my son had to do a project for college, and I forged 3 axe heads and had to videotape this whole process. Would you like one? And I said, absolutely, I want one. Because these things, if I was to try to sell this, the money I could get for this axe would be incredible. It would be incredible just because of his name, and he hasn't made them since 2016. And he hand forges a lot of the stuff that he does. And so the 3 dots, I asked him one time, I said, what's the logo? What's the 3 dots? He said, because when I hit it, I usually hit 3 times before I flip it. So bam, 3 times, flip, 3 times and flip. And that's where that came from. That logo came from Nick Westerman. And I have, just as you would imagine, I've been on this list multiple times, and I think I have about 6 of these. But this is the blade. He is so busy, he will only send you the blade. You either make your own handle or you get somebody to put a handle on it. My buddy Josh down there in Florida had some beautiful tiger maple, and I said, Mr. Josh, would you put me a tiger maple handle on? And this is the last Nick Westerman that I've got. They're really nice carbon knives. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. And I think I got about 6 of them. But these are the hook knives. He makes all different sizes, from micro hooks to large hooks that will move a lot of material. Because this is, as a general rule, this is how you are scooping out. This is a Swedish style spoon here. So that's how you're hogging out the bowl, would be these hook knives as a general rule. Now, I really believe that Mr. Westman made his name on the Tuka Cam, and I have 2 of them, and it's the first one that I ever bought from him. And you can tell based on the ugly handle, I made the handle myself. And I dated it 1/3/16, 2016 is when I made this. But these Tuka cams, I don't know how they do it. It's the design of the tool. But you hardly even have to strap it. They are so sharp. But whether you are using doing a kuksa, this is a wooden cup like a kuksa. This is made out of cherry wood that will help you to hog that out, unless you're, even if you were to use gouges to hog it out, this will give a real, you can get slices off of this that you can read the newspaper through with this thing right here. It's just a phenomenal tool. This is a 65 millimeter Tuka cam, and this is the second one that I bought, and it is a 50 millimeter Tuka cam right here. Thank you. I got one. Thank you. I got one right here. Jim was already thinking about me, and so he got me hooked up. But this is a 50 millimeter, and they're just wonderful tools, and they will hog out anything. And I use them just about on every spoon that I carve, even small spoons. I will still use them. It's unbelievable. They're so functional that I use them all the time. Here, this is a Reed Swartz. I think Reed's up in New Hampshire. I have a couple of his knives. This is one Reed Swartz, the first one I ever bought, with a birch bark handle. So I think it's about 75 pieces of birch bark, and then they're compressed and cut and put on there with some brass on both ends. But it's just a wonderful feel with a birch bark handle. It kind of looks like leather, but it's actually birch bark, and it just really works phenomenal. And then I've got several more Hans Carlson, Cervante Darve, but again, they're all Sloyd knives. Jason London from up there in Marion, North Carolina. But the tools are a big part of what I do. But as you can see, again, you need a carving axe, you need a hook knife, and you need a straight knife like this, and you are in business. Now, some of the additional tools like the Tuka cams and the You know, some of the other tools like the fro, those are just extras that make what I'm doing much easier. Now, as I was mentioning earlier about greenwood, my brother Kent, he's been carving somewhere 40 or 50 years, and he just said, I don't mess with greenwood. And the reason he said I don't mess with greenwood is why? Because it'll crack on you. And I couldn't tell you how many people I've talked to have carved bowls out of greenwood or made spoons, and they'll say, I just don't mess with it because it cracks. And so I learned the hard way, and I tried to learn fast what was the secret to keeping those spoons from cracking. And so a couple things here. Number one is the plastic, an unsealed plastic bag is your friend. The whole concept is literally just to keep the air off of the spoons. And you can tell I brought some wood in this, but this is what I use. I use 1 gallon bags, 2 gallon bags, 3 gallon bags. And if my hand is not on the spoon, if I'm not actually carving the spoon, it's in the bag. Now, why would I say an unsealed plastic bag as opposed to sealing it up? Because you don't want to trap the moisture in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the bag inside out about every 12 to 24 hours. Now, the reality is this: once I get that spoon, once I go from here, okay, all the way down to here, I'll be honest with you, it's going to dry really fast. So it ain't going to be in this bag too long. You know, now if it's a bigger spoon, or if I'm working on a kuksa, now I'm waiting on this bad boy to dry for weeks. And so one of the things, I'll take a male scale, and what I do is I just keep putting on a male scale until it equalizes. When it equalizes, I know it's dry enough I can seal it. And I use tung oil or half and half. How many of you are familiar with tung oil or half and half that's food grade? That's what I use. It's made by Milk Paint Company. But tung oil, it'll say, if it's food grade, it will say it on the container. And that's one of the things about spoon carving. I'd say, listen, I don't care whether you're using flaxseed oil, walnut oil, or tung oil, make sure it says food grade on the container, because we all know there's different types, you know, like boiled linseed oil. There's good linseed and there's bad linseed oil when you talk about putting it on something you're going to eat out of or drink out of. So make sure it says food grade. But if you're going to make kuksas and you're going to pour like boiling coffee into this cup, you better seal it multiple times with tung oil or 50 or half and half, or you're going to get a surprise. And I have had that surprise several times. So again, trial and error, I have learned. But the key to greenwood spoon carving is that, you know, when my hands are not on it, it's in an unsealed plastic bag. Now, the reality is, do I have to go to that extreme every time? No, I could wrap it in a cheesecloth or some kind of cloth and put it in a cubby hole. And that would probably work, but I have been bit before on that. I've never been bit. Well, I don't say never. I hardly ever get bit using an unsealed plastic bag. And so it just works really good for keeping your spoons from cracking. Same thing would be if I'm doing a small bowl. You know, I do these, I do a little small bowl every once in a while or something. It's no different. You know, just stick it in a bag. I learned to do, you can make a canoe with an axe just like you can a spoon with an axe. It's the same deal. But this is your friend right here to keep it, you know, from actually cracking. And so, you know, I could probably talk more and more about that. Same, you know, you hear the ones that turn bowls using greenwood. A lot of times they'll just take take all the shavings off of it, put it in a big trash bag, and then put it in there and let it just let it dry for a couple months. And then come back and do your finishing cuts on it. Because what I try to do, the key, I think, for me, for spoon carving is you want to move as much material as you can, that really all you've got to do is when it completely dries is to go back and do some finishing cuts. If it's a blonde wood, a lot of times you'll see the moisture's coming out, and you need to get that, you need to have some material left to be able to remove, to be able to finish the spoons. Now, again, the great thing about spoon carving, greenwood spoon carving, is very simply is being able to make something that is functional, that you can use in the kitchen for yourself, your wife, or give a gift to a family member, and they got something that they can use. My business model, if you want to call it a business model, has been this. I got the word out very quickly that if you had a cherry tree, apple tree, or some kind of tree go down in your yard, here's the deal. I'm going to make and gift you a spoon from your tree, and then they give me some of the wood. And that's been my business model for 8 years. And people, about every time I'm about out of greenwood, guess what? The phone rings. Say, Ted, I got a cherry tree. Ted, I got an apple tree. And I say, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to carve a spoon, gift you. You got a spoon from your tree. And I get a big kick out of that, because now they have something that they can remember that tree from in their yard. And they've got something, if they want to use it or if they want to put it up, that's fine. But they got something, and Tad makes more spoons. That's really been my model. And, for me, about making the spoons and selling those spoons at the market, I want people to use the spoons that I make to cook food for the people that they love and make memories. For me, that's what it's all about, because I have precious memories about my mama with that spoon. And my mama was the best cook in the world. And there was no question about that, and so, I have so many memories of my mama, using this spoon right here, Now, granted, this wasn't, Tad didn't hand carve this one, this, there ain't no telling where this came from. But this was my mama's spoon, and I got it, and I have all those memories, and I want other people to have those same memories. And so that kind of drives me in what I'm doing. So before I want to just show you a little bit of axe work, and then if you got any questions, okay? So again, just so that we're clear on this, number one would be just a small log. Now, if it's a really small one, what I'll do is I'll pop it with a froe or pop it with the axe, and then I'll just take the pith channel out, and I'll make one from both halves if it's small. Now, if I do that, if I can dictate the pattern that's in the bowl if I do it that way. If I carve it from the bark side down, I can create that circular. This is peach. Do you see that? Well, I did that by the way I carved it. I carved it from the bark down, as opposed from the belly, from where the pith channel's at. If I would do it that way, I get this pattern. If I carve it from the bark side down, I'll get this circular pattern. Now, and so, that you get that if it's a small, if it's a piece like this, and I can quarter it. You see what I did here? This is a quarter, okay? And so what I'm doing here is, now I've just taken the froe and I've taken a lot of the bark off. And the way I explain it is, what I'm wanting to do is I want to make a mini 2x4. That's all I'm trying to do. And why do I do that? Don't need to. I could actually carve a spoon with my axe and not really make it real pretty. But I like to, because that's my style. I want to make a miniature 2x4. So what I want to do is clean this up. And I'm a real visual person. So a visual person, I have patterns for profiles, and I have plan view patterns, and I got a bunch of them. Some I bought, most I made, okay? So what would I do? after I make that that miniature 2x4, I'll take that pattern or I'll hand draw it and I'll draw the profile. So what I've done is I've made just a little bit of crank in here in the spoon that we're going to make right here with the spatula. Guess what? There is no crank. So I don't have to draw a profile. We're just going to axe it out without having to worry about that. But most of the spoons that I carve have a crank. Okay. So here's a great example of this little gravy ladle or a big coffee scoop. Okay. There's a lot of crank in that. So I've got to take my axe and I've got to cut that crank in there. And so I'll take a silky right in the middle of that bowl and I'm cutting to it from both sides. And that's how I'm going to axe that out. It took me a while to realize that the key to spoon carving is remove as much material as you can with the axe. In other words, my good friend up in New York told me, said, Tad, quit playing around and start carving the spoon. In other words, I want you to carve the whole spoon with the axe. And when I got that in my head, it started making sense. And I quit spending 2 hours with my knife trying to get the excess material off the back of the bowl. Because see, that can frustrate you. If you can remove it with the biggest tool that you got, which is your axe, then you got it then. And once I figured that out, and that's the other thing, I had a couple guys that I well respected carvers, one over in the UK named Dan Lawrence, and one up in the Adirondack Mountains, who I just said, I said, hey, Derek, would you mind being a mentor for me? And he said, sure, I'll help you. And so both of these guys mentored me for 2 or 3 years, and I would send them a spoon and they would evaluate it. And so I did that, and they did it out of the goodness of their heart. But so what you got here is we made a miniature 2x4, okay? Then we clean it up and get a little closer to this. And then I draw the profile off, okay? I draw the profile. And then the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my silky saw, and you can use a Japanese pull saw or you can use a silky. This is a 240. I'll use a 210, a 240, or a 270. I finally figured out 240 is a happy medium. And when they wear out, I'll just buy a new blade for them. I got a lot more in these than I need, okay? But they work. I mean, they work very, very quickly to cut that crank out. So here you go. There's where I've already, and what I do is I take it on its side. So once I cut the silky, cut the line, what I do is once I cut to here, then I turn it on its side and I just kind of cut down here and I cut to that and I make it nice. And then I've got that. That's what I'm doing. So some people get real nervous when they see me doing this right here. But what you're doing is you're using the block for safety, and you're coming down like this. Okay. So, and the other thing is, most of the people that you see carving in Sweden or the UK, they ain't gonna have a glove on. Okay. It's very traditional. I've cut myself a lot, and I take some medicine and I bleed pretty freely. And I just made the decision. I said, Tad, I think you're going to wear a glove. And so, I finally figured out that I wasn't going to worry about what somebody else thought about me carving. I just wear a glove. And I give people, when I teach classes up at John C. Campbell or Winston-Salem, wherever I'm teaching, I take gloves and I say, look, this is your decision, but I got tired of buying Band-Aids. And if you drop this bad boy the wrong way, you'll be picking it up. Okay. There won't be any tears. You'll just pick up and go get it put back on, hopefully, or you're just going to miss it. Okay. So that's the way that works. So you've cut the crank in, and now it goes from there to now I'm gonna draw the plan view, and then a lot of times I'll start out the bowl. And how many of you notice that ads that I've got that's up on the table? It's a Hans Carlson ads. It is my friend. In other words, I used to use my axe, and what I do is I'll take this ads. I just sharpened this bad boy too. I take this ads. This is a Hans Carlson. It's a 35 millimeter, and it's what they call a cuxa adze. It's for really small bowls or a cuxa, and a cuxa is nothing more than a wooden cup. And these, just so you'll know, they're designed with a little lanyard and a, what do you call this little toggle? They're designed to wear on your belt when you go camping or sitting around the campfire, so you can put your hot coffee in it. Okay, that's what that's for. And I've been making them and giving them to all my kids and grandkids and anybody in my family that'll take one. I've been giving them to them so that they'll have their own cup. Now they're a beast to make. I mean, I spend more time making these than any. I can make 4 spoons in the time I make one of these. These are risky, but when you finish it, you know, you got something, and it's going to last till the cows come home. As long as you got several applications of tongue oil on it, it's going to be there long after Tad's gone. But what I was going to tell you is, what I'm doing is, and I learned to be amphibious with this one. You know what I mean? So I'm just going bam, 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 all 4 sides, and just kind of hog it out, and then I clean it up with the hook knife. I was being a little facetious there about being amphibious, but that's just me. Then the other part is, I'll take that silky, which is really important, and these are what's called safety cuts. Some people don't do them. If you're really, really good, you don't need to do that. But I put these safety cuts in there. Why would I take a silky and carve into here before I axe it out? To keep me from taking that axe and going right through the bowl. Okay, so that's what that'll do for you, is it gives you a safety cut in there, so that when you're axing this away, and trust me, I've went through several bowls, you know, and you just have to laugh, keep from crying. But that's what that does. And I usually do too. If I'm worried about the grain running out, then I'll do safety cuts all the way from the neck all the way to the end of the handle. I'll run safety cuts just to try to keep it from running all the way through. Okay. And then I did this, now I'm getting close. So once I have axed it out, I put these arrows here to show you which way you're going to be carving, which way the grain runs, because that's important. Just like they say, you know, you got to go with the grain. Not always, but most of the time. And it helps to get a nice knife finish. I don't use any sandpaper. I do only a knife finish. And the reason I do that is, number one, I don't have to. And over time, one of the things I like about a knife finish is it works good when you're washing. It doesn't seem to ever get fuzzy. And sanding, I tell people all the time, I said, listen, when I first started, I used to sand spoons, and those sanded spoons can really look phenomenal. The key is that you make sure the spoon's dry, maybe wet it, get some of that fuzz, re-sand it, just keep going till you get it to where it's supposed. If you don't know what you're doing, then when you wash a wooden spoon that's been sanded, what happens to it? It gets fuzzy, and that just means that we didn't get it. We didn't wait till it was dry, or we didn't get it sanded, you know, like we would. I'm lazy. I've learned to do a pretty good knife finish, and you can see, you know, you can see these feel of that. You can feel how that's a knife finish. And so I burnish. So I do a knife finish and then I burnish it. So in a sense, it's kind of like you're saying, but the thing about that is you're not removing those carve marks. Okay. You're kind of making them shine a little bit I use a porcelain, looks like a deer antler, but it's made out of porcelain. You can use anything. I've used glass. I've used all kinds of things. And that's how that works. Let me show you a couple cuts here, and then I'll take question because I know I've done run past your time. What I would do here is I'm going to do a couple safety cuts because I went ahead and drew my spatula. I went ahead and drew my spatula off here. And so now I would need to put a couple safety cuts in here. And when you're hewing with an axe, what you're doing is you're doing a series of 45-degree cuts is what you're doing. And then you're just kind of removing the material. And I'm kind of running this out because this grain looks funky on this piece of maple here, and it may run out. And what I tell people with a silky is do not go to the line, because if you go to the line, you went too far. Okay. So that's the way a silky works. You got to stop about 1/8 of an inch before you get there. But, there's a couple things that we can do here is we can do a series of these 45-degree cuts. You can tell, and once you do that, then you kind of come back here and you just chip them off. It's kind of like I tell the kids, it's kind of like when you were a kid and you were coloring, you just stay within the lines. That's how that works there. And this block right here is my traveling block because I had to make another one for the house because I carved so many spoons on this thing. It's got a dip here that I literally had to replace it. So I use it for a traveling road show. But you can see how these safety cuts kind of work for you, and it allows you to cut right along the side there. Now, one of the things that I didn't talk about was, for safety reasons, when you are hewing, let's just say you're trying to make your miniature 2x4. What you want to do is you go halfway up the piece and then turn it over. Okay. Don't try to do the whole piece. Do the bottom half, turn the spoon over, and then do this half. It's much safer that way. Once you get it to where it's like this, now it's all about moving material, because you know that you got to get this thing. Down to, see how skinny that is? So you can remove a lot of material. Now, the key would be don't get it this small. You got to let it dry so that you've got something to remove. And when you're doing these flat cuts, when you end up doing flat cuts with a knife like that, it's a good example of how you can, if you wanted to use a push knife like on a spoon horse, if you wanted to. Some people will modify a vise and just use a vise, but the whole idea is to remove. You kind of make a decision on how much material you want to move and where you want to be at before you start working with your knife. And that's going to be different for everybody. And there's so many cuts there's so many cuts. What you're going to find yourself doing is using a push cut for a lot of things, whether you're pushing the back of the blade or pushing the back of your thumb. But the push cut is used a lot. Now, what I would tell you is this: on YouTube, there's this series, and it's called the Mora knife grip series, and Jog Sundquist does it, and there's like 16 short videos, and he goes through every knife grip that you need to know for spoon carving, whether it's, you know, like moving a lot of material, or if it's just, you know, finesse stuff around the top of the bowl. He goes through every one of them, and I've watched that series many times, and it's spot on if you ever wanted to learn all the different cuts that you need. And so this is really, you know, this is cutting really good because, number one, this is wet, and the knife is sharp. I think where people get frustrated and you get into woodworking or carving is when their knife becomes dull and they don't know how to put an edge back on it. That's one of the things I wish I had done earlier, was learn how to sharpen my knives. I'm 8 years in, and I'm just now learning really how to sharpen a knife. And so what did I do? I bought every known sharpening system known to man. Everything from a Tormek T8 all the way down to an Arkansas stone, and everything in between. I thought eventually it would just happen through osmosis. You know what I'm saying? I got it all. I mean, I have them all. Diamond, you name it. I'm going to raise my hand. I have that sharpening system. And as it turns out, I sharpen my knives using pennies because I use sandpaper. I start with about 800 to 1,000 grit sandpaper, and I go up to 7,000 or 10,000, and then I strop and finish up. I've got kangaroo leather is what I use to strop because it's really thin and it doesn't compress. So I use kangaroo leather for a strop, and some kind of green rouge that you get. But the knife series, there's no way I could teach you all of those, but there's some phenomenal knife grips that you can learn. And so that you don't wear yourself out using the push cut, because I see that is what happens to a lot of spoon carvers. They wear themselves out just doing one cut. And if they would learn all the different knife grips, they would enjoy carving much more. But I think, you know, again, the moral to the story is use the axe and remove as much material as you possibly can. And if you mess up, guess what? There's some more wood out there. Okay. There's plenty of greenwood out there. And I would encourage you to start out carving. I would encourage you to start out by carving something like this, and then work into something that you're actually cutting crank. And I love the knife. I love the knife. I love the axe the best, but I love the whole process. My whole thing is I go out in the garage and I axe out and do most of that during the day. And then at nighttime, I sit in my rocking chair up in my carving room upstairs, and I do my finished carving up there. And like I say, it's all, I'm very passionate about it. I do it for the sheer love of doing it. And I can't put them down. I apologize for going over. Let me entertain a few questions from y'all. If you got any questions, I apologize again for going over. I hope I touched on most of the things about drying, how to oil the spoons and that kind of thing. But any questions about tools, drying, axing out, any questions at all? Okay, for like an eating spoon, I would tell you it's probably going to take me a couple hours to make, spoons like this. 2 to 3 hours for spoons like this. For something like this, a spatula, I might could knock one out if I'm by myself. I might could knock out a spatula, in 30 minutes to an hour if I'm concentrating. And it depends. Here's the other thing. What I do is when I get wood, a lot of times I'll go ahead and bust it up and I'll carve the billets. I'll make a bunch of 2x4s. I got a separate refrigerator in the garage, and it's slam full. If you open it up, there's a bunch of steaks in there, but it's all wood. Okay. Bunch of steaks. When my wife started trying to pull stuff out of the refrigerator and she was moving billets, she said, this is over. And we got a separate refrigerator, a freezer, put it out there. But so I would say 2 to 3 hours for an eating spoon or a cooking spoon, and 7 to 10 hours minimum on these cuxas, because it's a lot of, everything I do is hand carved. Okay. So you can see all those carve marks. They just kind of shine through there. And if you look on most of my spoons, the ones that are finished, there'll be a lot. I literally hand engrave my initials on every one of them with a coal roasting knife. And I usually put 4, I'll take a divot, 4 divots, and that stands for my grandfather, my father, my older brother, my twin brother, who all carved before me. And that's just a way of me kind of recognizing the history of carving in my family. And yeah, 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. Yes. A $300 spoon. No, hey, that's the thing about it. It's kind of like anything you make. You'll never get out of what the time you put into it. So my average spoon cost about $40. My average spoon that I sell at the farmer's market would be about $40 as an average. Some of them are 20, some of them are 75. If I get a crook ladle, I hate, a crook ladle would be, like a limb where it comes down and then another limb branches off. Those make really nice ladles because the grain goes from the tip to the tip, and know that you can screw them up, but if you do it right, you really got something. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, exactly. That's when I say greenwood, I mean wet wood, and I mean when it's still soaking wet. That's why I was saying, sir, Bob, that a lot of times, particularly with cherry, might not be a bad idea to let it season for a little bit before you carve it. It may carve better, might not be as stringy or whatever if you let it season just a little bit. Depends on the kind of wood, but sometimes I can't wait. I want to get in that box of Cracker Jack, so sometimes I can't wait. And I use anchor seal to seal the ends of the logs to try to keep the moisture in there. Because like if I get a whole tree, I might not mess with some up for 6 months. Now, here's the other thing that I've learned. Is if I can cut that thing in 4 foot, 3 foot, and 4 foot pieces, guess what? That thing's going to last a whole lot longer because it's drying from the inside out. So hey, all I'm doing is, guess what? I'm cutting the end. I cut a piece a walnut that I got in August. I cut about 6 to 8 inches off of the ends on both ends, and then I still had a couple of nice pieces in the middle. Okay, so the longer you can keep it, the better off you are. But my rack on the inside of my garage really works better at about, 1.5 feet. So guess what? I'm sealing a lot of wood because I don't like losing it. I really don't like losing it. Yeah, Bob.
Where do you get anchor seal?
I get it off of, you can get it at, what's that store in Charlotte? The fancy store where you get all the Woodcraft. You can get it at Woodcraft, or you can get it on on the internet, you can get it from where you get everything, Amazon. Yeah, you can get it from Amazon, and it costs a fortune. I'm spending about 40 some bucks for a gallon of anchor seal. Now, yeah, it lasts 6 months to a year. It lasts forever, depending on how many trees you get. You know, like I'm getting ready to get an apple tree this weekend, so I'm gonna get into it. But like I say, I'm learning. I'm trying to get it as long as I can and figure out how to store it. Because it's going to last a lot longer. Yep. Well, hey, I apologize for going over, but nobody enjoyed it more than I did. I love it. So if you got the show's over, if you got any questions, hey, catch me as I'm kind of putting things up, because I will have to put some things up because I got to drive back to Lexington, and I don't want to drive back at midnight. So, but hey. Thank you for attention. Thank you for being here. And I hope maybe one day you'll carve a spoon if you hadn't already. Thank you.